Welcome again to It Doesn't Take a Genius, conversation with introspective perspectives and pithy points of view. Here are your hosts, my friends, Max and Marty.
I think that's Mark and Mike.
Yeah, whatever.
Ramsey!
Marshall, so nice to see you there in your Frank Zappa kitchen.
Thank you. A little artwork. Don't ask me what I paid for it. It was outrageous.
I do wonder about that, though. Dweezil and Moon Unit, as I recall, they were allowed to write on their walls. Did anybody keep that? Like whoever bought the house after them, did they, cut out some wallpaper or some drywall and, put that in an auction house somewhere?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's like these people that try to get a Banksy off a brick wall.
Yeah, right.
They got jackhammers and concrete saws. It's like, I got to save this artwork. For those of you listening on the podcast without the aid of visual reference, behind me is a child's drawing.
Yes.
Some sort of psychopathic,
some sort of cocaine fever dream. Yeah, I get it.
Disturbed. Child's drawing.
Well, and when you brought this to me, Mike, the idea for this episode, this was the very first thought I had. We were always trying to give our clients a metaphor for what coaching is. What is it? And what I've noticed is that one of the worst metaphors is a coach, like a sports coach. It's not because a sports coach isn't doing coaching, but we have this image in our head of, Bobby Knight throwing chairs, or, tough love, or even cheerleading, like things done from the sidelines. But the real coaching happens, after the game. There are some things done in between games where they're doing things to help somebody get from here to there. So I've talked about a stage coach being the metaphor, like a metaphor of somebody transporting you from here to there to a better place, getting better. Your metaphor that you've come up with, I think, is way better. So why don't you introduce us to your topic?
Well, thank you. And I just stumbled across it. I had a large group of people. They'd done some work that was visual. They'd created some scoreboards. We talked about gamification, which is on a previous episode.
Mm-hmm.
And so they'd sent me pictures of their scoreboards, and we were getting ready to review them as a group. And my goal is always to create a safe environment for the participants, right? How can I make this as safe as possible? So anytime you start to give coaching and feedback to somebody, there's the potential for it to go really poorly. And so my thought was, well, we need to do this in a coach-like manner. But even more importantly, one of the things I learned as a parent, and I wish I had learned it right at the beginning of my journey into fatherhood, which is if a child shows you a picture, they've spent an hour creating in the room, they come out and they go, "Dad, look at this," and and I asked this group, I said, "What is the one question that you never want to ask?" And they're like, I don't know. I said, so we figured it out. So the one question you don't want to ask is, what is that?
Mm-hmm.
It starts with what? Seems very,
seems like a good question.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm leaning in. I want to know. But it's not good. Right. Immediately, there's a sense of judgment that it's not readily apparent. In my eyes as the artist, well, it's obvious.
Right.
Right. It's it's a dad cooking pancakes on a stove in the Grand Canyon. Everybody knows that. So the better question is, okay, so tell me about it.
Mm-hmm.
And the cardinal rule here for this, and just for this type of feedback, whether it's this or coaching, is you always let them go first.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You don't start with your opinion. You don't start with your observation. You don't start with your judgments. It's like, okay, tell me about it.
Mm-hmm.
What do you like most? Right? What's exciting to you about it? What would you change if you were to do another one? What would you do differently? What else could you do with that?
Right.
And so then and only then, after you've exhausted their feedback, both positive and constructive,
Right.
then we can ask permission to share our thoughts.
So that's brilliant. And I watched a father do this who was literally an artist. And it was fascinating to, his daughter sitting at a restaurant table, just using crayons, on the menu. And I look over and, she's like, "Dad, look." And I look over and I'm like, holy geez, this is obviously the daughter of an artist. And my brain couldn't wrap around what I was looking at here. But, he went through exactly the process you described. And then he said that, then he gave some input, right? He said, "I like what you did here because you pressed harder on the crayon on this line and it made it shade the picture that you're drawing," which I had not noticed because I am not an artist and had not figured out the really cool things he had done. But he didn't lead with that comment, right? Like that was the follow-up, let me give you some thoughts from my expertise, which he definitely had. But it had to start with the questions to where they were listening to the input you could give them as the teacher, as the coach, as the parent.
Oh yeah, no, that's absolutely fabulous, and yeah, you've earned the opportunity
Right.
to provide some feedback,
Right.
through your listening, your questions, you're wanting to have a deeper understanding of what the situation was, what the drawing
Yep.
is, whatever it might be.
Yep.
So I always do this as my cautionary role play. Just warning. And
Mm-hmm.
so anytime somebody says, "Well, we're going to do some role plays,"
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, here's the only way that this is going to turn into a learning opportunity, and that is the person doing the role play has to debrief themselves first.
Right.
They go first. If they get done and everybody starts peppering them with, "Well, you forgot the thing with the
Yeah.
thing, and you didn't, why did you say that?" All of a
Right.
sudden, yeah, it turns into a fight. But a simple, our standard coaching questions. That great role play. What do you think you did well? Uh,
Right.
Well, yeah, I asked a good question. I made eye contact. My body language was good. Yes, yes, all that. What would you do differently if I had you to do it again?
Right.
Well, I probably, yeah, never got around to doing this part, or that part was a little bit weak. I could have done that sooner. And they'll usually hit about 90% of what you were going to tell them anyway.
Yep.
Only it's now me demonstrating situational awareness, me having the opportunity to talk about what I'm strong at, where my opportunities are, and that I've already identified them. And
Yeah.
then only then do you turn it to the crowd and go, "Okay, what did you guys like?"
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And they'll agree with a few things. They may add something. Anything else that you would suggest that they do differently? So
Yep.
instead of running back through all the things that person said, yeah, we agree with that. And yes, and here's something else.
Yeah.
And now you've had a good debrief. It felt safe. The next person who's going to do the role play will now be thinking about how to get better at the skill and
Yeah.
not be thinking about the
The
verbal
person.
beatdown.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Right.
Spanish Inquisition
Mm-hmm.
that's about to occur after I
Yep.
demonstrate the skill that was just taught to me 3 minutes ago.
And let's face it, if I didn't wait until I had permission, so to speak, if I didn't wait until the person had debriefed themselves and I just started unloading absolute golden nuggets, this person, if they would take my advice, they would grow so much. They're not going to pick up the nuggets, either because they had not arrived at the conclusion that that's something they needed, or because it had become so judgmental, for lack of a better term, that now they're defensive and they can't take it in. So either they weren't aware they needed to take it in, or they're actively preventing taking it in. But either way, you don't win if you go first and tell. You got to do the asking and involving, as you say.
Oh yeah. Well, how many of us love unsolicited advice?
Right.
Yeah, yeah. I was thinking, here's what you should be doing.
Right.
And literally, and they've studied this. They put people in MRI machines, and they've noticed that when you start to give them advice, the brain quits lighting up.
Yep.
It gets darker and darker and darker.
Yep.
You know, yeah, and you've heard people say, yeah, when my advice went in one ear and out the other, went past them, went over, yeah, you know, bounced off. It's like,
At worst, it turns into the Bill Engvall stand-up routine where he talks about the golfer who's just had some lessons and he's going to tell you how to fix your game. You want to know what you're doing wrong? You know, right there on the course.
yeah, and that sounded like a question. Want me to tell you what you're doing wrong? But a lot of times there's no pause at the end. It's
Right.
Yeah, you want me to tell you what you're doing wrong? You're not keeping your head down. Right? There's just like zero transition. Just go straight into the advice.
Right.
And now everybody's shutting down. So the simplest analogy is it's just like, you know, when a child shows you a photo, your first thing is, all right, so tell me about it. You go into a coaching conversation. All right, so you had a rough week. All right, so tell me about it. Right, what went well? What were the struggles? What can we do to get past those?
Yeah,
and always let them go first.
I want to add one last thing, and it's I didn't tell you I was going to say this, but to promo your book a little bit. You know, once you've asked, tell me about it, and had them do such a thing. You know, some things are going to come up that are off the mark. You know, they're going to start talking about things not under their control, you know, the market, or, you know, a rough customer or an employee situation in another department, things that they can't impact. And so we do have some good coaching questions to help you do that. And so I'd strongly recommend folks read Coaching Amplified, because it's a little black book. Like I think I've mentioned this before. I timed myself reading it just at a nice steady pace, cover to cover, and it took 16 and a half minutes. It's a short book, and it's packed with really valuable advice on what you do with this, you know, furthering the metaphor of how you deal with a kid coloring.
Yeah. No, and I appreciate the unsolicited testimonial and endorsement. That's always really nice. And we'll put a link to it below, and
Let's do that.
Let's put a link to the podcast where we talk about the book.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. So all these ideas. The next book, using the system we just told you, it should take about 2.5 minutes to read. So yeah. Tell me.
It's actually a coloring page. It's just not even a book. It's just literally a page.
Yeah. Tell me about it. Hey, would you let them go first? Tell me what you like. Tell me what you do differently. What else could you do?
So
I'm a great dad. I'm a great coach. I like both those things.
I think that's good.
Speaking of you know, great mentors to us, great coaches. Let's why don't we throw it up to our announcer?
Amen.
And that, I guess, is that. It doesn't take a genius. No rights reserved, nothing trademarked, copyrighted, or even original. Feel free to give it to anyone, anytime, using any and all media formats. Warning, Mark and Mike may or may not make another one. I'm your announcer, and I did not get paid a nickel to do this. They won't even let me tell you my name. So, until next time, if there is a next time, stay safe, be well.
That's good enough.